Okay, you're in for another treat. We have Paul Hawken sitting right here. Woo! We're really excited about this. Paul is an environmentalist, an entrepreneur, and an activist who has dedicated his life to environmental sustainability and changing the relationship between society, business, and the environment. He's also the author of 8 books, including 5 New York Times bestsellers, including Drawdown and his new work titled Regeneration, Ending the Climate Crisis in 1 Generation. Paul will discuss regeneration, climate consciousness, and justice. Come on, Paul. Let's hear what you have to say. Let's do this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Don't you love fire ecology? And I mean, my God, it's so beautiful. The breadth and depth and meaning of fire that we have suppressed for 100 years here. And the results show, so thank you very much. I just have an announcement. Does anybody have a Tesla with a license plate 8UBA721? You do? Okay, well, don't worry. It's still there. But I was in the green room, and it was noisy, and I felt like, I want to go to the real green room. And it's right by your car, by the way, in the parking lot. And there's trees there, and there was a raven on your car. And it was eating seeds, I guess, I don't know, but food from the gutter where the windshield wipers go up and down. And then all of a sudden, it realized it could see itself in your windshield. And it was like, whoa. And it looked again, and then it did some things I've never seen a raven do, and I feed ravens every day at my house, and it stuck its feathers out in all different directions, like, and looked again and going, wait a minute, then, and it's like, it was a confused raven, anyway. And what I loved about the raven is curiosity. It was so curious. Like, what's going on, you know? I got the food on the Tesla, that's cool, I understand that, I do it all the time. This, it was really different, and so forth, you know. So anyway, your car's good. I think. Maybe the windshield wipers, I don't know. I want to ask you some questions. I'm usually get to be here with Soren. He's such a good interrogator. And he's back there in case of emergency. Okay. Coming soon, maybe. And so I want to ask you a question. How many of you here don't believe in climate science or that the Earth is warming? Just raise your hand. All right, okay. Now, and that's another question. How many of you are hopeful that humanity will come together and meet the requirements of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change restrictions, that is, in terms of fossil fuel emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, so that we will hold temperature increase to 1.5 C? How many are you hopeful? Oh, wow, okay, that's amazing. How many of you are in despair, think it's game over, and we're screwed? Can you just, okay. Well, okay. How many of you know what 1.5 C means in Fahrenheit? Ah, yeah, not very many. Isn't that interesting? And because we use language in the climate movement that other people can't understand. Isn't that interesting? Doctors do that sometimes, and that's not very good care. But now we're talking about the Earth, and we're using language that actually flies over the head of most people, including you. It's 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit, okay? That's simple math, but we use F and they use C, okay, right? So for me, drawdown and regeneration started in 2001, in 9/11. And I saw on TV the takedown of the second tower, the jet flying into it, Jet A fuel exploding, and the tower starting to collapse. And what I knew was that the world had completely changed. I had no idea how or why or what it would become, or did anyone? No, I was just like, whoa. And I thought about it that whole day, and I was looking at what I was doing and this and that, and I was like, what am I going to do for the rest of my life? Because this is a pivot point. And I thought about it, and I thought about it, and I thought, well, what you can do is just be helpful. In other words, measure what you do by that. Is it helpful or is it not? What you say, is it helpful? Your activity, is it helpful? And if it's not, don't do it. That's it. That's all. I needed something simple. And so at that time, I had read the third assessment of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, and it was more pessimistic than the prior ones, which they always are successively, mostly because the science is suppressed by politics. There's no such thing as consensus science, by the way. Science is evidentiary. It's not based on agreement. And yet, the agreement was from the Saudis, the Venezuelans, from China, from Russia, even the US and so forth. Well, it's not that bad, really, So you had to parse the report and kind of read between the lines. Yeah, it's bad. And so I went around at that time and noticed two things. One is that nobody was naming the goal. The goal was mitigation. Mitigation. Mitigation means reducing the pain of something. Why would we want to mitigate the end of civilization? Or fight or tackle, that was a good one. I'm going to tackle climate change. Yeah, go for it. Combat, And this language seemed to miss a goal. And the goal to me clearly was to reverse global warming. If we're not doing that, then what are we thinking about? So that's what drawdown means. It's a scientific term. I didn't coin it. I just used it. And what I did is I went around, though, to NGOs and to companies, to institutes, to universities, and said, we need to map, measure, and model the most substantive solutions to reversing global warming, because it does not exist. Here it is, 2001. I mean, if you went on Google and said, what are the 10 most important things I can do? There would be use cold water in your washing machine. Oh, that's a good one. And then this is the Union Concerned Scientists. Put a power strip in your home entertainment center. I love that one. If you don't have a home entertainment center, do you have to get one to put a power strip in it? I mean, it might as well say, love your mother and pet your dogs. These are proverbial kind of things, and so what it did is had the effect of feeling disempowering to individuals, like, really, we are screwed if this is what I can do, right? I mean, you'd have to have an IQ lower than room temperature to believe that was going to make any difference, right? And so I went around for years and saying, kind of like Diogenes, looking for a wise institution, and to see, can we just make a list of what we know how to do that is at hand, we know how to do, we have the technology, the engineering, the practice, and we can measure the cost, we need that. And no one did it, and so in 2013, long story, I decided to do it. I didn't know how to do it either, by the way. They asked me to do it. I said, if I knew how to do it, I wouldn't be asking you. And so we got a bunch of people together, and we figured it out. Okay, that's drawdown. But the interesting thing about that, as drawdown was published in 2017, and then Regeneration is a sequel to that, the languaging around climate became more acute, I would say. In 2016, when drawdown came out, Penguin, my publisher of 30 years, said, climate books don't sell. We don't want to really publish this book. It's my editor. I said, where's your loyalty? And he said, well, it's paper bound. That means it won't be reviewed. New York Times only does hardbound books. They don't do paper-bound books. Oh, thanks. And it's in color, very expensive. 100% post-consumer waste paper. Do you know how expensive that is? I mean, they had all these reasons why they didn't want to publish it. And it went on for a year. People were equivocal about it and this and that. And finally, it was Catherine Court, the publisher, God bless her. She's an amazing woman. They had one more meeting where everybody's going, maybe production, promotion, this, that, all being very equivocal about not saying no, not saying yes, and so forth. And she said, at the end of the meeting, may I ask one question? Which is like she's the CEO, And I said, yeah. And she said, tell me, if we don't publish this book, why are we here at all? Boom, bingo, right? We can ask that question of ourselves every day. Why are we here at all, given where things are? Now, if you're hoping that I will give a speech that's hopeful, you're out of luck. If you're hoping I give a talk that's about fear and loathing and terror, you're out of luck as well, okay? I'm not going to go there. I want to go someplace else, And I want to go to the way we talk about it, because in the language that we use around climate is something that we know very well as individuals, which is a sense of separation. They say that we wake up 10 times a night, we don't remember it, but we're scanning, our brain's scanning for threat. It makes sense, going back 20, 30, 40,000, 50,000 years sleeping outside, who knows? I don't know. The brain's wired that way. But whether we remember that at night or it just happens in the morning, it happens to us all the time because that part of the brain is so powerful. And we look, am I good enough? Did I dress right? Do people approve of me? Am I going, all the questions. We're all that way, right? But all of that is egoic. Of course, it's about I'm separate self. And so when we look at the climate crisis, it's very difficult not to look at it from that individuated point of view. It's just, we're wired that way. And so the language is created by men. With all due respect to Catherine Hayhoe and some of the great women scientists, the men created the language. Combating, tackling, fighting, mitigating. Who wakes up in the morning and says, I can't wait to get up and mitigate? The point, But embedded in that language is othering. Every woman here knows about othering, okay? Right? Yep, absolutely. Since you were little. But othering is like the climate. We're going to fight the climate. Where is the climate? Where is it? Oh. And the idea that the biosphere and the atmosphere are two different things, where did that come from? They're the same thing. We have a gas, and we have matter. We're one being. The Earth is one thing, And so this idea that we're going to go tackle, fight, and mitigate, or whatever, climate, and one more thing, climate change. We're going to fight climate change. Well, the climate changes every nanosecond, okay? It's supposed to change. The Earth changes its axis and all that sort of stuff, and there's currents in the oceans, and temperature changes in the air, and so forth. And it creates what? Strawberries, grizzly bears, rivers, glaciers, salmon, popcorn, dragonflies. The change in climate causes changes that allow life to become what it is today. So that fact, trying to fight change, good luck. So we're fighting something that shouldn't be fought. But not only that, we have separated ourselves. And so from my point of view, the reason to write Regeneration is the word itself, right? And if you look at how we've approached it, I want to go to people and say, how is this working for you? I don't know who to go to, because 98% of humanity is disengaged, is not doing anything. After 45 years of climate being in the public sphere, 98% of people aren't doing anything. Now, half of them know full well that it's coming, what the causes are, roughly or in detail, but they still aren't doing anything. So why could that be? And I don't blame people. I'm not pointing my finger. I'm just saying, could it have something to do with the way we language, the way we talk to each other, the way we connect? Because the language we're using is profoundly disconnecting, right? So the way you heal a system, any system, immune system, ecosystem, social system, is to connect more of it to itself. And that requires a very different mind state than the one of being a climate hero. I'm going to fight, I'm going to go out to do this and so forth. I'm not decrying any activists that are out there and doing stuff. Bring it on. It's fantastic. But on a larger level, we're not engaged. I'm not speaking on behalf of you. I'm just saying the bigger we. We're not doing it. And it shows, right? So what can we do? And to me, regeneration is not about being right. It's not about trying to change people's minds, because you can't, if you notice that. It's hard enough to change your own mind, so what are you going to do? Change everybody else's mind? Not likely, right? So really, it's about creating the conditions for self-organization, creating the conditions in which people can change their own mind. And so regeneration, I easily could have, when I was writing it, said at the beginning, it's all connected. Yeah, it's true, it's trite, it's cool, it's a cliche. It's like, yeah, thank you for sharing. I mean, instead, what I tried to do is make connections that are more like, who knew? You know, like, who knew a dragonfly only lives for 1 month, but actually in the air, but 5 years underwater, you know? And that they have 24,000 cornea, and they can see up, down, sideways. They can see in all directions at all times. Isn't that weird? Can you imagine having 24, you have 24,000 cornea, and you're flying around going, what do you see? What is it thinking? You know, I mean, who knows, you know, and so forth. But to create a sense of fascination about this extraordinary miracle we live on, this planet called Earth, and who we are, right? And so that somebody reading the book might come to the point where they go, wow, it's all connected. Yes. But they have changed their own mind. And so what are those conditions? What do we need to do in order for that to happen? Well, it's very different than what we have done, because when climate first came out in the public sphere, it was very much about future existential threat. You've heard that many, many times. That's what science said, and that threat causes fear, okay? Got it. Activists took that up, and then they went to shame, guilt, and blame, right? Of course, you know, fossil fuel companies, Chevron, Exxon, this, that, cars, GM, I mean, there's lots of potential targets, right? And basically, threat, fear, shame, blame, guilt, stir well. What do you have? You have people just shutting right down. Of course. And what hasn't been properly explicated and shared is that every problem is a solution in disguise, or it would not be a problem. How can it be a problem unless there's a solution? The moon is not a problem. Moonlight's not a problem. I mean, there's so many things that just are, and we don't think of them as problems, you know. We may not like them even. Right? So when we look at the possibilities, it's a very different way of seeing the world. I was at UC Santa Barbara, and auditorium much like this, dark, much like this, 800 people, mostly, I don't know how many, maybe 200, 250 students, I'm not sure how many actually. But I presented with data from the university that said 70% of the students here are depressed, panicked, in fear, full of anxiety, and half of them are considering whether they should make a family or not, have a family or not, when they find their partner. And I recited that back to the audience, and I said, you know, for you who comport to that 70%, I'm not worried about you at all. I'm worried about the 30%. Because those emotions are there for a reason. We're human. We're brilliant. And stress is not there to make us feel stressed and then feel more stressed and to take pills and this and that, you know, or watch Bridgerton on Netflix, you know. That's not what stress is for. Stress is to make you act. It's hardwired. And the thing about that first question to you, it was a trick question. Sorry. How many of you do not believe in climate science or that the Earth is warming? And the thing is, you all should have raised your hand because climate science is not a belief system. Right? Right? And try it on your deniers. It really works. It's like, you know, you don't believe? And the reason that's important is that with the work of Andrew Huberman at Stanford and others, we know this. Our beliefs do not change our actions. They don't. Our actions change our beliefs. It's the other way around. And so what the Earth is telling us to do is do, go act. Even if it's cold water in your washing machine or whatever. I mean, start somewhere. And it not only changes you, but it changes the people around you, which is really, really important. The way you change others is by who you are, what you do. We just saw it in the person before me, you know, and I'm sure you'll see it all day, and so forth, you know. And so I want to suggest that we look at this from a point of view of making ourselves, how can I say this, about living in terms of possibility. Knowing what's going wrong, how fast it's going wrong, that it's going wronger, that we're, you know, basically up a creek without a paddle and so forth, all the science, hallelujah, it's really great science, it's good. But we have to draw a red line. We have to draw a line between, got it, thank you for the science. Now let's get to work. Let's get to work. And rather than being befuddled or being confused or by being threatened or by being, you know, full of anxiety about the science, it doesn't take it away. It doesn't mean we don't respect it. It means that I haven't got time for that now. I understood, I read it, let's go, right? And that connection is twofold. One is do, but it's also about listening to others. You're probably the 1%, whether you know it or not. The top 10% of income earners cause 56% of emissions. The top 1% cause 25% of all emissions. And you don't have to answer, but has any of you made a plan to reduce your emissions by 50% by 2030? And are you acting on it? Fair enough, okay. Think about it. Because that's what the whole world has to do by 2030, according to the IPCC, right? But what I meant by this is that in order to make that connection, we also have to be open to others, you know, to hear others, have them be heard instead of being right. Because as soon as we're right, we make somebody else wrong. And that is called separation. That's called, you know, there's a beautiful thing, the book Regeneration is going to be a gift to one person who asks one question at the end by the microphone, by the way. So I want a question from you. I'm not going to let you work it out. You get a free book, okay? There it is, it's on the couch, okay? I brought it for you, whoever you are. But the book was very much influenced by Jack Kornfield, whom you'll hear later tonight on the board of Regeneration, until very recently, Tara Brach, Conda Mason. And it's not a Dharma book, but it is definitely Dharma taught. And I don't know about you, but I feel anxiety too, okay? I feel despair. My job is every morning to read, all the incoming, information and news about climate, what's going on. The good news too, and I tell you, 2 hours every morning, if I read it at night, I wouldn't sleep at all. But even now, at night, I wake up and I just like, it's a lot to take in. It's really a lot to take in. There's a wonderful story about us humans. And there's a woman it was shown in 60 Minutes 4 years ago. It was Vivian Higgins, African-American woman, led a choir in Harlem, and she was looking for her connections, who her relatives were, through Ancestry.com. And there's another guy named Marion. He's a guy, West, who was looking for his relatives, okay? And they discovered they were related. Well, he is a big white cattle rancher from Missouri, who wears a cowboy hat, and Vivian is African-American woman in Harlem who conducts a choir. And they discovered they're relatives. And what's so beautiful about this program is they show her going to Missouri, and they meet, and they just break into tears and hug each other, and they're sobbing. And he says, God has brought us together, right? That's who we are. That's who we are, right? And when I say that, because regeneration means putting life at the center of every act and decision. It means a pivot. It means looking at everything we do and say that way. And it's not out there like sustainability or this or, it is us. Regeneration is what life does. It's the default mode of life. It's your default mode. Because anytime we care about self-care, we care about others, our family, our children, our uncles, aunts, our community, our neighbors, our pets, our dogs, whatever it is, our congregation, our church, our temple, our synagogue. That's regeneration. That's regeneration. So regeneration is coming home. It's not going out to some idea that some white guy on the stage announced, and wrote a book about. No, it's you. It's you already. All 37 trillion cells in your body are regenerating right this second, or you wouldn't be listening to me, or couldn't be. You'd be dead. That's happening to you right now. This is just extraordinary miracle at the very core of life, and we are that. And feeling and causing to be separated by our advertisements, our media, our digital media, definitely go on fast on that one. But all the things coming at us are always separating, trying to make us think that we have a separate identity. We do not, right? And so, as I said, home is the heart, and connectedness is relatedness. I feel relatedness. Relatedness is love, When do you hear love and climate together? They're like this. And it's either like falling in love with the world, each other, and all that raven on the Tesla, going like this, or we silo ourselves, and the results will show. So, anybody who would like to ask a question, I would love it. And I know it's not a competition, but there's only one microphone. If you find the microphone.
Oh, I found it.
Oh, good. Yeah. You're it.
Thanks for your Raven story. It was so beautiful. It made my day. So, my question is about grief. I work with executives in emotional literacy, and there's been more grief in the last 2 years than I can think of in my life.
Right.
And I also have a degree in climate science, and so I didn't realize when I was studying that behavioral psychology and climate science actually are the same thing. And so my curiosity and my question is, in a world or society where people are afraid of grief,
Yeah.
and I'm getting really emotional thinking about this. How do you create that? I mean, change management is founded in grief studies, and we're so terrified to talk about it.
Thank you so much. What a great point. It's really a statement, not a question. And it's a great statement.
Well, how do we do it? How are we going to solve
Oh, I
this?
don't-
We're all so afraid of sadness.
This
and
is where I can
talking
just
about
give you an
it.
observation, not an answer, because it's like, there's one of those questions that it's so good, it's unanswerable. And but the thing is, what I have seen is in the last few years, and I've worked with CEOs, I do work with CEOs of large corporations, some of them are vilified. And what I've seen is the change, exactly the one you're talking about, which is that sustainability was like getting your social license stamped once a year. It's like, you're okay, good. You won't be mau too much this year because you did this. What I see now in their eyes and in their voice and in conversation, that they're like, to use a French word, holy shit. They're like, they got it. And they feel it. That's very different than it being conceptual. It's experiential. And they start to think about their connections, their children, their family, their nieces, their nephews, their grandparents, whatever. And they find themselves at the head of this super large corporation, right? And they've talked about it. I could leave and do something, or I could stay here and with difficulty try to reimagine what this corporation is and so forth, But it comes from, they haven't used the word grief, but it's like, it's tacit. It's in their sharing and so forth. Please wrap up. Okay. And so, who's there? Okay. So I'm going to wrap up. But anyway, thank you. And thank you for your work. And thank you for really going right to the heart of it. Because grief is about connection and so forth. And this is your book, and so we'll meet over there later. Okay. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right. So we have a very quick, mindful, thoughtful break, and we'll be back here at 4 p.m. We have Tracy Anderson interviewed by Irene Au, and then we have Diego Young Pueblo and Jack Cornfield. So enjoy a break and be back here at 4 o'clock. And thank you so much.